This morning in the Uvalde school massacre, CNN has obtained video and audio of a desperate police radio call, including what appears to be the voice of a child, telling an officer they had been shot. It's not the first time we've heard of calls for help from inside the classroom while police waited outside. We're going to play that audio for you in just a moment. Plus, there are new details about a key figure in the response to that shooting. Uvalde School District Police Chief Pedro Arredondo will not be sworn in to his newly elected city council seat today as originally planned. Should he keep his job as police chief?
It's a critical question. Also today, a bipartisan group of senators will meet on gun reform. President Biden is optimistic that this time around he will get Republican support. The president says, quote, rational Republicans are ready for a deal. But we will see. All of this as the Uvalde community prepares to bury 10-year-old shooting victims Amerie Jo Garza and Mayta Rodriguez today. Visitation services for Nevaya Alyssa Bravo, Jose Manuel Flores Jr., and Irma Garcia will be held today as well.
Little bodies in little caskets. Let's begin this morning with CNN correspondent Nick Valencia. He is near Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. Nick, CNN has new audio and video. Desperate police radio call. Yet another warning from inside that school building as it all unfolded. Tell us what we know.
Hey, good morning, Jim. It is chilling video, and it shows just how chaotic things were as this shooting was unfolding. We obtained this video from an individual who did not want to be identified, but says that he began recording it on his Facebook Live. And you could hear in this recording a clip of an adult being told by a child that they had been shot. Now, according to this individual, that was part of radio traffic of Customs and Border Protection. It is unclear why that would be on the radio traffic between CBP agents, but the individual who recorded the video said as soon as agents realized he could overhear, they turned down that video. Now, that radio call. Now, before we show you this video, we want to warn you that this could be very difficult for some of our viewers to watch.
Are you in there?
Where? A kid got shot? They shot a kid?
It's a short clip that gives us some insight into what happened as that shooting was unfolding. It is unclear at what point during the shooting that video was recorded. Jim, Poppy?
Nick, this morning we hear from also a first responder whose wife and child were inside of the school during the shooting. What did he say?
Yeah, Jacob Alvarado spoke exclusively to NBC News, and he tells NBC that he was at the school earlier that day to attend his daughter's second grade award ceremony. He also says that his wife is a fourth grade teacher there. He said he was at a nearby barber shop when he remembers getting a text. He says he doesn't know if he got the text first or his barber got the text first. But listen as he describes what happens next.
My barber actually heard shots, or he thought he heard shots. He was coming through the parking lot, and he asked me if I heard it. I told him I didn't hear anything. I went inside the barbershop, sat down, and then I can't recall if he received the text first or if I received it, that there's an active shooter. There's an active shooter. Help. I love you, for my wife.
And what did you do next?
I looked for a gun. My barber said he had a gun. Both of us raced over to the school and met up there.
Alvarado went on to tell NBC that at one point he was actually outside the classroom where the gunman was barricaded and thought about going inside, but said he didn't have his normal tactical gear on him and thought better of the decision to enter that classroom. This all is coming out as we prepare in this community to bury some of the smallest victims. The mayor releasing a statement to CNN saying that he decided to postpone a city council swearing-in ceremony because he believes that today should focus on the families and those who lost loved ones. Jim, Poppy.
We'll have more on that right now. Nick Valencia, thank you very much for your reporting.
You bet.
Uvalde School District Police Chief Pedro Arredondo, as we mentioned, will not be sworn in to his newly elected city council seat. The move comes as the city has canceled a special meeting that was set to take place today. In a statement obtained by CNN affiliate KSAT, Uvalde Mayor Don McLaughlin says, quote, our focus Tuesday is on our families who lost loved ones. The special city council meeting will not take place as scheduled. Arredondo has been under intense scrutiny, obviously, since this shooting, after the Texas Department of Public Safety confirmed that the Uvalde School District Police Chief was the official who made the decision not to have the classroom breached where the gunman killed 21 people last week. We should note the Texas DPS did not identify him by name at that time. But Pedro Arredondo, also known as Pete, was elected to the council earlier this month. According to the school district, he has nearly 3 decades of law enforcement experience. A board of trustees approved him to lead the Uvalde School District Police in 2020, Jim.
Joining me now to discuss is Uvalde County Commissioner Ronald Garza. Mr. Garza, thanks for taking the time this morning.
Good morning, Jim. Thank you for having me on your network.
So you heard us there with the update that there will be no swearing in today for Arredondo. Should he be sworn in at all to the City Council, given events at the school?
Well, he was elected to that position. Personally, I think he should be sworn in. I think it was postponed just as a measure of respect for the funeral services that will be taking place. That's my understanding.
Okay. How about his job as police chief? Should he remain in that position? This was an enormous test of his leadership and resolve, and there are 19 school children and 2 teachers who lost their lives.
Yeah, well, that's a matter, an issue that the school district will have to undertake. As a county commissioner, we don't oversee that. So, but I'm confident the school district and Mr. Arredondo will come together and do what is right for the community of Uvalde.
What do you think is right for the community?
Well, I think what is right is that there's an investigation being undertaken. I think there'll be an independent investigation. I hear the Department of Justice is also going to be investigating what took place in our community, and I welcome that. I think we owe it to the community, to the parents especially. They have questions and they need answers.
Yeah. I want to talk in a moment about how Arredondo became in charge of the scene there, given the number of agencies. But before I get to that, you've likely heard this audio that appears to be a child inside that school as this was unfolding who'd been shot. It's not, as you know, the first call that we have a record of. We have multiple 911 calls that came from children inside that classroom as this was underway. Do we know if the information about these calls got to the commander or any other responding police on the scene while this was unfolding? Because they made a decision not to go in based, it seemed, on the assumption that all the children were dead, but there's information that showed at least some people knew children were alive. Do we know if that information was getting to the commander on the scene?
You know, I have no knowledge of that. I'm kind of like a lot of people here. All this is coming to light now. The children are taught, to make that call, that 911 call.
Yeah.
And they did, and they did. They made their calls. Why law enforcement did not take action is beyond me.
Yeah. I mean, either it's bad information sharing or it's further negligence to have knowledge from inside. Let me ask you about Arredondo, because he is the school district police commander, quite a small police force for that integrated school district. I believe, single digits. Why was he in charge, given the number of agencies and all the resources that were responding?
I think it just came down to jurisdiction. It was something that took place at a school campus at Robb Elementary, and I think he was the man in charge, and it just came down to jurisdiction.
You knew the gunman's grandmother, who was, of course, the first victim of this. She was shot before he went on to the school. There are reports that she may never speak again, but her at least life-threatening condition is improving. Do you have any update on her status at this point?
I'm just like a lot of people here. I heard that she's doing well. I heard she's going to survive, and I'm very glad to hear that. The family comes up sometimes of the shooter, and I've known the family for many years. They're a good family. They value faith. They value church, and this should not be a reflection. This one act, this senseless act of violence, should not be a reflection on the family.
Ronald Garza, we know you and the community are going through so much. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us this morning.
Thank you, Jim.
And now to a CNN exclusive. Supreme Court officials are intensifying their search for the person who leaked the draft opinion from Justice Alito that, if it holds, would overturn Roe versus Wade. According to 3 sources, officials are taking steps to require law clerks to provide cell phone records and sign affidavits. This is really unprecedented. The exclusive reporting comes to us from our CNN legal analyst and Supreme Court biographer, Joan Biskupic. I mean, this is a huge deal. And what you're learning, I understand, is that some law clerks at this point, they're very young, by the way, are beginning exploring hiring outside counsel.
That's right, Poppy. This is obviously something that the Supreme Court is taking very seriously, not just the breach of about a month ago, but also any further leaks that the Chief Justice wants to make sure don't occur. So they're taking this very aggressive step, and it's already a tense time behind the scenes because they're resolving this abortion case, but also a gun rights case, religion cases. So it comes at a time when you already have heightened tensions, and the clerks are wondering, what do they do here with these requests for affidavits and potential very extensive cell phone information. And one lawyer, an appellate lawyer who has experience in government investigations, told me about the possibility of law clerks turning to outside counsel. And he said, that's what similarly situated employees would do for other government organizations, and that it would be hypocritical for the Supreme Court itself to somehow interfere with lawyers, with law clerks going outside to get at least some advice from counsel. Now, it's a delicate situation, Poppy, because, these clerks already feel like they're under a microscope and all this scrutiny, and if they turn outside for a lawyer just so they, just to know what their rights are here, they don't want to draw much more suspicion, especially at this very tense time behind the scenes.
Well, it would be notable for the court not to let people seek legal counsel on a legal issue like this. A bigger picture here, beyond the leak investigation, you have a potential Supreme Court decision that's going to change the lives of millions of women in this country. What do we know about negotiations on the Mississippi abortion case, and when, frankly, we're going to see the final opinion?
That's right, Jim. It's not just women, but it could have potential for privacy rights in many other areas. There's a rule at the Supreme Court that dictates that all drafts need to be sent around by June 1st, the finished draft. The one that had been leaked was dated February 10th. So Justice Alito has obviously been doing much more work on it, probably fielding requests from colleagues about changes. And I anticipate that there were also efforts behind the scenes at a different kind of compromise. So as of tomorrow, his colleagues would have seen his final version. And then it ain't over till it's over, Jim. There are probably still many more negotiations. And I expect to see this opinion likely by the end of June, if not early July, given how tense things are and how hard it's been for them to actually focus on these cases.
And by the way, as you mentioned, given the attention on Uvalde, there's also a notable gun decision that may come out during that time frame,
right,
too. Joan Biskupik, always good to have you on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joan. Still ahead, bipartisan talks on gun reform start today. Will this time be different? Will they compromise? Where's the common ground? We'll have those details ahead. Also, President Biden lays out his plan to fight inflation ahead of a meeting this afternoon with Fed Chair Jerome Powell. We'll speak with the Deputy Treasurer. President Biden will meet with Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell at the White House. That happens this afternoon. The president just laid out his plans to tackle inflation in a new op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. He writes in part, "We now have a chance to build on a historic recovery with an economy that works for working families. The most important thing we can do now to transition from rapid recovery to stable, steady growth is to bring down inflation." Joining me now to talk a lot about inflation is Deputy Treasury Secretary Wally Adeyemo. It's great to have you. Good morning.
Well, thanks for having me, Poppy. It's great to be here.
So in reading the op-ed by the president and considering this moment when 8 in 10 Americans say the government is not doing enough to tackle inflation, all of the proposals that are laid out are long-term. They would take at a minimum a few years, from fixing broken supply chains, improving infrastructure, building 1 million units of additional housing, dealing with the upcharges from these ocean freight companies. Is there anything the White House is going to do to tackle it right now?
So, Poppy, I think the president has demonstrated that he understands the American people's biggest challenge at the moment is high prices. And we've actually taken immediate action. You look at the historic release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which was putting more oil on the market to help reduce prices. That was immediate action. Look at what we've done in terms of supply chains. Look at the Port of Los Angeles, for example, where the president worked with the private sector to get it open 24 hours a day to make sure that you dealt with some of those challenges. That was immediate action. So the president's focused both on taking immediate steps to reduce inflation, but also taking long-term steps as well. He's meeting with the Fed chair today to talk about both of those things.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the SPR release, the biggest release ever of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. It didn't bring down prices. Gas prices are 39 cents higher today than they were then. So when you look at all of the families struggling really with this inflation, from their food to gas and beyond, when can you tell them inflation will get back to a normal, healthy level? 2%? Are we talking about 2023, 2024, later?
So, Poppy, I'm not going to make predictions, but what I am going to say is exactly what the president said, that he understands that high prices are a challenge for people. High gas prices make it harder to pay for things because he's felt it as someone who was growing up in a household where they dealt with food, high food costs and gas costs. And what the president's saying is he's going to do everything he can to make sure that we bring down the cost of goods working with the Fed. As he said in his op-ed, the Fed has primary responsibility here, and he's making clear that he's going to give the Fed the room that they need to take action. But in addition to what we've done with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, he's calling on energy producers to produce more energy in order to make sure that we bring down prices. And he's also created more than 9,000 permits in the United States to ensure that more energy can be created in the United States as well. And he's committed to doing everything we can to bring down costs as quickly as possible.
So there's a limited amount that the Fed can do, right? There's rates, but beyond that, there's only so much, and they really can't do anything to deal with energy prices. One thing the White House could do is act on what the president said 3 weeks ago when he said that his team, you guys, are considering whether the U.S. should lift those Trump-era tariffs, at least some of them on China. Given how high inflation is now, is that going to happen in the near term? What's the plan?
So, Poppy, I think it's important for us to step back and realize that inflation is not just something that's a challenge here in the United States. It's a global challenge. And we come at this challenge in the United States from a position of strength because our economy has been growing faster and stronger than any other economy in the developed world. And as we transition to more sustainable growth, it's going to be important for us to make decisions that allow that sustainable growth to continue. One of the things that we are thinking through is how do we create a level playing field for American firms? And that's why these tariffs have been put in place with regard to China. And we're considering how we use tariffs as a tool to do just that. And ultimately, our decisions with regard to what we do with tariffs will be around, do we think that they have an impact in leveling the playing field so the American firms and workers are put in a better position to be able to sell American goods around the world going forward?
But respectfully, Mr. Deputy Secretary, that strength is not economic strength that most American families are feeling right now. Every poll tells us that. You talk to folks at the grocery store, they tell you that acting on these Trump-era tariffs on China would provide some relief. Why not make that decision now?
So, Poppy, we're actively considering what we do with regard to those tariffs. I think the important thing for every American to know is that the president's committed to doing everything we can to bring down costs in a sustainable way. One of the challenges that we faced for too long is the fact that because of China's unfair practices, American jobs have been lost and our companies have been unable to compete. So we want to make sure that we address both short-term challenges like inflation, but the long-term challenges that we face as well.
So over and over again, over the last 1.5 years, the White House and the president and Treasury officials, Fed officials downplayed the inflation risk. The president in July of 2021 said this is expected to be temporary, talking about inflation. Jerome Powell, I don't expect we'll be in a situation where inflation rises to troublesome levels. Janet Yellen, in March of 21, is there a risk of inflation? I think the risk is small. Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary, has been warning about this for a long time. A year ago, almost exactly now, he said, we are taking very substantial risks on the inflation side. That was a year ago. Should more people in the Biden administration have been listening to Larry Summers?
So, Poppy, what I can tell you is that the President, Secretary Yellen, and the entire administration is focused as our top priority on lowering costs today. No one could have predicted the war that Russia launched on Ukraine and the impact that's having on prices today, from global energy to food prices. The supply chain shock that's been created by COVID isn't only something that's happened here in the United States, but has happened around the world. And the president in his op-ed laid out 3 things that we're going to do to address it. 1 is give the Fed the room it needs to take the actions it needs to. 2 is take actions like reducing energy from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to bring down the cost of things like oil. And 3 is bring down our debts and deficits over time in order to ensure that America both has the resources to pay for the things that we need, but also to help deal with the high costs in our economy.
I hear you, and we just talked about the SPR release that didn't bring prices down, and now the fact that you've got these EU sanctions and EU cut back, way cutting back from Russian oil imports, that will likely drive oil prices even higher. I guess I'm trying to ask, is there a lesson learned here? Should ears have been more open to critics and folks like Larry Summers?
So, Poppy, I think the most important lesson that we've learned here is that we've got to do exactly what we've done since the beginning of this administration, which is everything we can to deal with the challenges the American people face. Think about where we started. When the president came into office, 20 million Americans were unemployment. Today we have historic job growth. We also didn't have many Americans who were vaccinated, and today millions of Americans are vaccinated. So what the president's going to do going forward is use that same resolve and deal with inflation and to make sure that we address these challenges going forward. And we're going to do everything in the administration we can, and we're going to give the Fed the room it needs to make sure that it brings down inflation over time.
All Americans appreciate the effort and hope relief comes soon. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Secretary. We appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks for having me, Poppy.
Zoom call, Poppy.
When President Biden was in Uvalde, Texas on Sunday, he told grieving families something would be done to address gun violence in this country. And he said he's optimistic that lawmakers will this time make it happen.
The Second Amendment was never absolute. I think things have gotten so bad that everybody's getting more rational about it. At least that's my hope and prayer.
That's his hope and prayer. What's actually going to happen? Our congressional correspondent Lauren Fox joins us from Capitol Hill. Lauren, good morning. What are you hearing? Should he be hopeful?
Well, this meeting today is going to be significant, Poppy, in part because it's occurring when lawmakers are not even in Washington. They view this issue as so important, so imminent, that they need to take action now. So the Zoom call taking place today among a bipartisan group of senators, and Senator John Cornyn, a Republican from Texas, addressed his plans for this call yesterday when he was back in the state, saying that his hope is that members will lean toward the middle, and he said he plans to do the same to find some kind of resolution on something like an expanded background check bill or legislation to give greater access to mental health care in this country. Now, Cornyn did address that there may be other steps that other states want to take that go beyond those measures. He said that that is going to be action that states should be addressing in their own legislatures with their own governors, because obviously what would work in one state like New Jersey or New York is going to be very different than what lawmakers in Texas might be willing to accept. But obviously, this is an important first step. The hope is that lawmakers could find some middle ground before they get back to Washington next week so they could move much more quickly when they return. Meanwhile, in the House of Representatives, Democrats are not pausing, taking immediate action. The House Judiciary Committee announcing that they will hold an emergency hearing to vote and advance gun legislation on a series of items. One of them, raising the age at which you can purchase a gun like an AR-15 from 18 to 21 nationally. There's also going to be legislation to bar people from buying high-capacity magazines, as well as legislation to encourage people to use safe storage practices in their homes for the firearms that they already have. So a series of bills that the House Judiciary Committee is going to be marking up. Of course, whether those bills would pass in the Senate is a very, very high bar, Poppy. But it's important that both chambers taking their own actions, hoping to get something, anything, across the finish line.
I mean, it's for show, unless they can get votes in the Senate. And they've done this before in a whole host of things, so we'll see where it goes. Lauren Fox on Hill, thank you. It's been a week, 1 week, since a gunman stormed into Robb Elementary School. Today there will be two funerals for victims Amarie Jo Garza, little girl, and Maite Rodriguez, little girl, both 10 years old. 21 crosses, one for each of the 19 children and 2 teachers, now stand outside the Sacred Heart Catholic Church. There will be funeral for 12 of the victims at that church. Each cross, and boy have we seen this before in so many places around the country, will be a reminder of lives lost a week ago today.
All of those kids that have crosses there, those are all my friends. They all died, and I just feel really bad because my friend, you know, it broke my heart into a million pieces. Those are all my friends, she said. Joining me now is Archbishop Gustavo Garcia Sierra. He's head of the Diocese of San Antonio, of which Uvalde is part. Archbishop, we appreciate you coming on this morning.
Thank you.
So I can see it in your face, and we were talking in the break. You've had a lot of difficult conversations, and you have a difficult, almost impossible message, I imagine, for the families of these children and others who are grieving right now. I'm curious, what do you say to them?
Well, I don't say much to the families, but I show through gestures, expressions of care, and in some way to convey that it's a community and many people throughout the world who are thinking of them and that they are suffering with them. Yeah. It's how to be one, and being a spiritual leader is at the level of the soul, at the level of the heart, and there is different ways how to get there, but there are not the common ways. You know, it's not the speeches, it's the love, the tenderness, the compassion. As you were saying about the many funerals that will take place in Sacred Heart Church, we need to deal with each one of them in a different way because each family is different.
Yeah.
Each child is unique. And so we will try to do the best we can. And then to assure them with gestures again that we will be for them in the long run. It's not just this moment. And the means of communication, some people, they are concerned or afraid to turn on the TV or social media. This is a time in which people, they need to be connected and hear, even if it hurts, even if you're not a member of the family, that it hurts. It's a reality in our country. We are in decadence because we have been fostering a culture of death to make the arms sacred, and then with the same arms to kill people. I mean, there is no logic to it.
No,
logic
there isn't.
to it.
Is it consistent to be pro-life in terms of abortion, but also pro-gun and against most or all gun regulations, as you discuss this as a matter of the church?
Well, that works for politicians and politics. People that they say that are pro-life, and is so narrow their vision. To be pro-life, that we will call in the Catholic Church respect life, has to be consistent, which means from the womb, conception, to natural death, and all in between. And that means children, the youth, the sick, the drug addicts, the married people, the homeless, the people in death row. We have to be consistent. And for the most part, politicians are not consistent. And they use the pro-life to promote their base. And it's a very narrow picture. To take care of the baby in the womb and to kill it when it's 9 years old. How do you, what is the logic there? It's hard to comprehend for everybody. But it's a fact, it's happening. And the person who doesn't have money, the person who has a different color of skin, the person, I met with children 9 to 11 years old in one school in that region. It happens that the school is called Sacred Heart 2, not far from Uvalde. And I went and I needed to learn from them. And I was asking them what was in their hearts. And there were about 50 comments. One of them, one kid said very clearly, he said, we have to pray also for the killer. We have to pray for the family of the killer, somebody else said, because they must be hurting a lot too. And another girl, the last one who spoke, she was hesitant. And finally, a teacher, a mother said, this girl wants to talk, Archbishop. Sure. And she said, I know how that feels because I had been in the middle of shootings. My goodness, how we're going to be pro-life or respect life if we just see with a very short vision what life is. Life, human life has not been placed in the forefront of our conversations. The dignity of everyone. And we don't want to touch reality. And the reality needs to speak to us in order to respond appropriately.
Well, I could see your own pain and frustration etched in your face, and certainly what you must have heard from those children as well. Archbishop Gustavo Garcia Sierra, thank you for sharing your emotions here. We hope to have you back. We hope to have you back. Matt says a new ban on Russian oil imports to Europe, at least by sea, will cut off the money Vladimir Putin is using to fund his ongoing invasion of Ukraine.
EU leaders agreed yesterday to ban 90% of Russian oil imports by the end of this year. This is part of a sixth sanctions package. Let's get straight to our colleague Anna Stewart. She's live in London. Anna, good to have you. There are some caveats here. Jim noted one of them. It's still really significant, though.
It's hugely significant, but it has taken a month of negotiations since the EU Commission first announced this as a proposal. This is the sixth round of sanctions. It's definitely been the hardest yet. And there are a number of items on the list. We can show you some of those. It includes removing Russia's biggest bank from SWIFT. That had been left off a previous list. More individuals being targeted, banning state-owned TV broadcasters, more of them. But it's that top one, isn't it? Banning 90% of Russian oil imports by the end of the year. It was 100%, though. So this is where the big concession has been. Essentially, it is not including a pipeline that goes to Hungary, Czech Republic and Slovakia, so they will still be able to get their Russian oil via pipeline for the foreseeable. Plus, there is quite a timeline on this. So this embargo is not immediate. It will kick in for crude oil within 6 months, 8 months for refined products. And critics have said this is too long because this gives Russia a long time to find new customers. That said, it will be hard. The EU is Russia's biggest customer for oil and gas. And for oil, currently it gets $10 billion a month from the EU for that. That will reduce to just $1 billion once the embargo does kick in.
Anna, thanks very much for the reporting for us from London.
That I think we owe it to the community, to the parents especially. They have questions and they need answers.
Yeah. I want to talk in a moment about how Arredondo became in charge of the scene there, given the number of agencies. But before I get to that, you've likely heard this audio that appears to be a child inside that school as this was unfolding who'd been shot. It's not, as you know, the first call that we have a record of. We have multiple 911 calls that came from children inside that classroom as this was underway. Do we know if the information about these calls got to the commander or any other responding police on the scene while this was unfolding? Because they made a decision not to go in based, it seemed, on the assumption that all the children were dead, but there's information that showed at least some people knew children were alive. Do we know if that information was getting to the commander on the scene?
You know, I have no knowledge of that. You know, I'm kind of like a lot of people here. You know, all this is coming to light now. You know, the children are taught, you know, to make that call, that 911 call. Yeah. You know, and they did, and they did. They made their calls. You know, why law enforcement did not take action is beyond me.
Yeah. I mean, either it's bad information sharing or it's further negligence to have knowledge from inside. Let me ask you about Arredondo, because he is the school district police commander, quite a small police force for that integrated school district. I believe, you know, single digits. Why was he in charge, given the number of agencies and all the resources that were responding?
You know, I think it just came down to jurisdiction. You know, it was something that took place